Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Well, welcome, Elizabeth-Irene, and it is wonderful to meet you in November at the Children's Africana Book Awards in Washington, D.C., our ceremony. And it's so good to see you again so soon and to have you here today to talk about this wonderful novel. You
Thank
know,
you very much, Brenda.
there's a shortage of novels in the U.S. About Africa, especially for grades 9 to 12. That little, we're getting a number of books for high school students. We have picture books, but that age level, so your book fits perfectly there. And we are so thrilled to have a coming of age page turner that addresses the environment and other important issues. Now, climate change is not explicitly addressed in the novel, but we are seeing its effects and the actions that youth are taking to build a healthy environment. And as we just heard from Dr. Andrews, young people are the solution to the problems we are facing. And so please introduce Crossing the Stream and the young people there who are, tackling the problem, and introduce it to our audience.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brenda. Now, here we have, this is my book, Crossing the Stream. I hope my image is clear. And Crossing the Stream is, its main character is Ato. Ato is 12 years old, and there's one thing that he really wants more than anything else in the world: to visit an eco paradise that his father helped to build. His father has passed away. Ato lives with his mother. And of course, as life presents itself, he has a couple of problems. Getting into the eco paradise his father helped build is not a walk in. He has to present a winning project, a winning eco project, along with his friends. And my story is about the obstacles that Atu faces while he's developing this project. Well, the main obstacle he faces is a threat in his neighborhood from a very powerful figure. In addition to that, in the background, well, not so much in the background, but really unfolding in his life, he has to go and live with his grandmother. His grandmother is a woman his mother is very suspicious about. So my story actually started off from the grandmother. I mean, if you don't mind, I will show you a picture of my grandmother. This is the book we put together on her passing. She died at the age of 95 when I was 40 years old. Now, when I was young, my grandmother to me was a fire breathing dragon. I was so terrified of her. I'm so glad I grew up to have a relationship with my grandmother in her old age, because I found her to be the wisest, strongest, most encouraging, most generous woman that I knew. And she fed and poured so much strength into me as I grew up that I often wondered later on in life, what would it have been like as a child if I had felt that courage and that strength and that warmth and that love from her. As a child, I was just terrified of her. But the relationship unfolds and evolves, and I found her to be such a wonderful person. And this is the kind of grandmother that I have given my main character. Now, there is a rift in the family. So my main character's mother and his grandmother have, there's a gap that needs to be filled there. And yet I look at grandmothers, I look at the role older people play in the lives of younger people in ideal situations. And I'm moving back to the conversation with Dr. Carter, I believe, a little earlier on. And there was one thing that she mentioned, which I would like to um, bring up here. She spoke about what we need to bring up in children, what we need to develop in children. And she talked about the 5 C's: confidence, competence, connection, caring, and character. And each time she mentioned every one of them, I wanted to cheer, because that essentially is what Crossing the Stream is all about. The confidence, the character, the confidence that was developed in our young character as a result of the relationship that he had with his grandmother. And we hear that young people are the solution, young people are part of the solution. Climate change is an intergenerational problem, and older people are affected and are just as moved as younger people are. And I feel that young people and old people and older people are in such unique positions, because young people have got the vim, they have the enthusiasm, they have the energy, they have the drive. And then But then often they also are faced with the burnout, and they're faced with the can I not? And then you have the older people in their lives who are able to infuse wisdom and encouragement and give support and give that gentle push where needed. So I am looking at the necessary relationship between generations that helps us all come together to combat climate change effectively. And I feel that this is what how the story plays out, because my main character has to come against a very powerful person in his community who is willing to do anything at all to destroy the environment in order to achieve his own aims. And the courage that my main character develops to combat this issue is as a result of the relationship that he forms with his grandmother.
I love Nana, Ato's grandmother. And for me, she showed that, like, no matter how old you are, you can still grow and learn
Yes,
from making past
absolutely.
mistakes.
Absolutely.
I want to come back to the bird sanctuary, but before I do, since we're talking about Nana, tell us about her garden, what she's growing there, and why neem trees are so special. Because I think she has some solutions to use to growing things without toxic chemicals.
Yes, yes. So there's a little bit of background to that. I am a scientist, and in my undergrad degree, I did my thesis, my project was on natural pesticides. So that's something I've always had a bit of an interest in. And then I had my grandmother, who was absolutely in love with what she called God's garden, God's pharmacy. She had just about any herbal remedy you could think of. When we were little, we dared not tell my grandmother, oh, I have a tummy ache, or if you coughed in front of her or you sneezed in front of her, she would quickly brew up something bitter and dark for you to drink, which would invariably get rid of the problem. But so Atu is our main character, and Atu's grandmother, oh, she has a garden. Now, Atu himself has got a very small square patch, completely paved over with concrete slabs in his own home. He calls it his 4-hop garden because 1, 2, 3, 4 hops, and he's been able to cross from his front door to the main gate, and there are no trees there. But he goes to his grandmother's house for the very first time, and with some reluctance from his mother, because his mother, for various reasons, has a deep suspicion of Atu's grandmother. And I'll just come over here and see if I can find the page where Atu first comes across his grandmother's garden. So his mother has dropped him off outside his grandmother's garden, and he's standing there with some misgivings, wondering why he's here. But he turned to Nana's garden, which sprawled out to the right of the porch. Red hibiscuses grew along the wall. Their long orange stalks, dusted with yellow pollen, hung out from the heart of the frilly petals. Vegetables grew along the side of the house. He recognized tomatoes, okra, peppers, and lettuce. But the real magic rose up ahead of him. He counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spreading trees. They grew way above the roof of the house. The trees silently beckoned him. He stepped along the paving stones that wound an S-shaped path to the garden. The leafy branches allowed the setting sun to speckle the ground with bronze light. He walked past, rubbing his hand on their rough trunks, a mango tree, an avocado, and then he saw it. Another couple of steps and he would have trod on it. A green tarpaulin rectangle spread out on the ground underneath a neem tree. A pyramid of loose earth rose beside it. He leaned forward, lifted the edge of the tarpaulin, and felt his heart stop. A hole in the ground, deep and rectangular, freshly dug. It looked like a grave. So this is his first introduction to his grandmother's garden, and he comes to discover that there's just a wealth of 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 wisdom and healing within that garden. Because much later on, he develops a fever, and his grandmother makes a neem steam potion to sort out his fever. Now, this is something which is very common in Ghana and generally across Africa. I will limit the knowledge of what I'm speaking about to Ghana, but leaves and herbs and roots and seeds and nuts are often drawn on when it comes to traditional healing, and often with some pretty good results, although there's some varying uh, conversation about how much regulation there has to be in that space. And so here is my main character very feverish, and his grandmother, she props him up on a footstool, and steam was rising into his face. A pool of dark water formed before him with floating leaves and branches. She was bending him over, pushing his head down. He struggled, trying to fight her off, but her hands were too strong, her dark honey hands. He whimpered, and she draped something soft and heavy over his head. Everything went black. It was hot. Steam filled his nostrils, his lungs. He struggled against her, but her strong hands would not let him go. A faint hint of bitterness hit the back of his tongue. Shh. She wanted him to stop fighting. She murmured something about Neem. Neem, her potion. Breathe in, Ato, she coaxed softly. Breathe in. Shh. And she was stroking his shoulders. Her whisper sounded like the rustle of breeze through leaves. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. There was no fight left in him, so he breathed in and out and in. His pajamas were clinging to him. Gentle hands replaced them with dry ones. A warm hand caressed his forehead. And he was a falcon gliding over dark water, rising, soaring up into the midnight sky. And this is a neem steam potion, which Nana used to heal his fever. It's commonly used for healing malaria, and it was very commonly used during the COVID pandemic in Ghana with a decent amount of success. Yes, and we all tore off branches of neem leaves to boil up and inhale as a remedy or as a preventive action against COVID. And these are some of the areas where I feel that the older people have got a lot to introduce younger people to in exploring what nature has for us. And our biodiversity is an area that I bring up in this book, and to a much greater extent in the book that follows it. That is big older brother is coming after this one that really faces, yes, the climate issue, the environmental issue, the eco issue. But biodiversity is also another area where older people have got a lot to introduce younger people to. A lot of younger people are born or live within spaces where they haven't seen anything different apart from a four hop garden with paving stones all over. And a lot of older people have lived in an environment where there were butterflies and there were leaves, and you could play in the stream and you could fetch water from the stream and you were fishing from the stream and so forth. And helping our children see what was, I think, is a very strong way of enabling them to imagine what can be. So that link between the older generation and the younger generation, I think, is so powerful. And I think at every opportunity needs to be preserved and needs to be promoted in order to help position our younger ones to work in the movement towards creating a greener, cleaner earth.
Perfectly said. Now, between Nana and Ato is the father. And so when we begin the novel, we hear about a letter that father has left for Ato. And can you tell us a little bit about how this project, this school project that he has with two of his friends, and the Numa Bird Sanctuary, which is so important to him as it was to his father?
Right. Yeah, so the Noma Bird Sanctuary, Noma actually comes from the Akan word Anoma. Anoma is bird. So Anoma is plural for birds. And that's where the name comes from. So Noma is, yes, Noma is an island. Well, in this case, it's fictional, of course, but it is set in the area of the Volta River, the Volta Lake, which is one of the biggest man-made lakes in the world. And it's a migrating point for lots of birds from around the world, because that is in effect what we actually have in that part of the country, where we have migrating birds from everywhere coming in there. And so we have this beautiful island, and it's been built into an eco paradise, and its entry is very restricted. And Ato's father helped to build it. Unfortunately, Ato's father died tragically and suddenly, so he never had a relationship with his son. More than anything, he wants to go there. And one day, a notice comes on the school board, and I'll read the notice. Ato stared at the print on the school bulletin board. His breathing stopped. Noma spreads its wings to welcome to Asafo, Earth Warriors. Are you old enough to leave home on your own, but young enough to believe that the earth needs you? Do you have a project to protect the green earth, the blue sky, and the animals and people between the two? Show us. Then let us ferry you away from the crowded city to the mountainous bird island of Noma. Your project is your invitation, Atu read. Submit it to us by June 1st. That was 12 weeks from now. Noma was open at last. A vision of the island flooded Atu's mind. Rock-studded mountainsides and leafy lower hills. He had sailed over the choppy grey waters that surrounded the bird island 1,000 times in his dreams. He had landed on its famous eastern peak, the Dawn Locust, where the first rays of sunrise struck in an explosion of red and orange light. Here, thousands of bird species lived protected, including his favorite bird, the peregrine falcon. So Atu is extremely excited. Noma is open so long as you have a winning project. And he's recalling a letter that his father had written to him. And if you don't mind, I'll read the letter his father had written. This letter was written while he was still a baby. And so he never got to hear his father read it out to him. But it's a letter that he treasured. He kept it close to him and read it time after time. And the letter read, "My son, it's been months of hard work, but now the dream is forming before my eyes. I'm sitting on the highest point of Noma. It's called the Dawn Locust. One day, I hope you will sit here with me. Ato, now that the Noma dream is here, it must stay alive. Those of us who believe in it must protect it. For now, the sun shines, but enemy storms are gathering. One day, they may be unleashed. If they are, I have a plan. It is protected, somewhere below this rock peak where the sunlight first greets Noma, where the falcons watch over the valley. With enough Asafo, we can protect this dream. Whenever I hold you in my arms, I can see you are truly like me, Asafo, a protector of our world. When your steps are strong enough to match mine, we shall walk this mountainside together to protect this dream. Only a few people are privileged enough to step on Noma. You will be one of them. You will prove yourself good enough to come here. One day, your toes will be firm enough to grip this rock." And yes, so this is Noma that Ato has dreamed, but he's read this letter since he could read, and this is all he has ever wanted. And his father, as you can tell from here, his father has envisaged a time when this eco paradise is going to be threatened. And that threat, this first book builds up on that, and the actual threat is unfolded in the book that follows this, which will be published later on this year. So I'm really looking forward to that coming out. And in that book, the children face a much bigger threat. This was scary, what they went through in crossing the stream, but it is scaled up. And I think it is just a glimpse of what our children face when they see what goes on in the world. And I feel that very often our children look at what's going on in the world and probably ask themselves, can I make a difference? Can I really make a difference? I think generally, study after study shows that young people are more likely to feel overwhelmed or also feel a little fatalistic about climate change. They've been born into a world where everybody is talking about climate change and the effect of it and extinction and so forth. And they're beginning to wonder whether their actions can possibly make a difference. But of course they can. And I feel that so long as we link hands and each generation understands the unique role that they are playing and what they're bringing to the picture, yes, there is hope for our young ones. And more than anything, our young ones need hope. They need to be told that this can be done. At every age, people require encouragement. If you don't mind, I'll just go back to the second book I wrote, The 12th Heart. This was in the year 2010, and my husband had just had a heart attack, and my computer had crashed, and it had crashed along with the story that I had written. The story was gone. I hadn't saved it on a hard drive, silly me. And as far as I was concerned, I wrote a story, computer crashed, story is gone. My husband went through this terrifying health scare. He's getting better, and I just need to devote all my attention towards helping him. And my dad would ask me, "Oh, what about that book you were writing?" And I said, "Oh, Dad, it's gone. It's gone. It's crashed. Computer crashed. I'm not going back there again." And he kept asking me, "The story was wonderful. You told me about it. It's a wonderful story. You should write it. You should write it." And I kept telling him, "Dad, it's gone. I'm tired. My husband needs me." And after he had gone on like that for several weeks, I began to think, And then my dad said, "You keep saying the story is gone. It's not gone. It's in your head. All you need to do is get it out of your head and get it out And I thought to myself, actually, he's right. And I went on to write The 12 Hearts, and it sold 100,000 copies. And it's a reminder to me how much encouragement we need. I was 40 years old when this happened. I wasn't a baby. I was 40 years old as a mature woman, married with 3 children. And yet, the words that my father spoke, I found so encouraging that it pushed me enough to write the book better than I had written it before. And it went on to do so well. And I look at our younger children, and I think that's how much they need us as well. That's how much we need to encourage them. We have young activists out there, and sometimes they come across as very confident and so forth, but it cannot, the amount of encouragement they can get from the right word cannot even be quantified. So it is important that all of us recognize this and constantly be there to give that support, help make the connections that they need, and help give the encouragement that is so badly required for consistency in this war against climate change.
Yes. Well, Otto's father, this whole idea of him in the project creating this garden. So if you could talk a little bit about Otto's garden and Papa Kojo, who has a nearby garden. One of them is using one strategy to grow plants, and the other is using another. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I will. So in this book, we have Atto presenting an eco project along with his friends. Now, what they decide to do is to use environmentally friendly pesticides and compare them with vegetables that are being grown across a pond from them. Now, the children choose a beautiful, lovely nature spot. It's an area where they go to play. I'm hoping that I can find let me see if I can find the page where I can describe what Turo is like. Now, Turo is the area where the children have their eco project, and Turo comes from the Akan word for garden. Garden is true, so I just use that for it, and I'll describe it. So, Turo was their getaway. For years, Atu and Jifa and Leslie came here to play pilolo, to grumble about teachers, and eat green mangoes until they had the runs. The rock Aturo was rectangular, like a wide cabinet. It was their safe perch from parents and chores. From that stone throne, they argued about which one of them would be richest in future, while tossing pebbles into the pond, watching them plop and vanish into its murky depths. He and Jifa would wade into the water to watch bubbles rise to the surface, and they would tear up pondweed and reeds to weave into little mats. And there were evenings when he came here alone and sat on Chiro's rock. In his mind, he was a peregrine falcon, and the rock was the peak of the dawn locust on Noma. He would watch the sky turn orange and purple at sunset and dream that it was sunrise at Noma. And he could hear his dad telling him, I knew it. I knew you'd make it, son. I knew you'd make me proud. At those times, the only sounds around Chiro were tweeting birds in the crescents of palm trees behind them and lizards scuttling in the undergrowth. Occasionally, Papa Kojo's grunts would carry over the pond as he and his sons worked their vegetable lots. So Papa Kojo is a local farmer who works on a pond across from Chiro. And Papa Kojo depends on the pond for his vegetable patch. In addition to that, he also works with chemical pesticides because that's what's available to him. That's what he knows. And it's cheap and it's available. And the children's quest is to see whether local pesticides would give them environmentally friendly pesticides would give them the same vegetable produce as Papa Kojo. However, Papa Kojo comes across a threat. Suddenly, something is happening. Papa Kojo's vegetables are suffering. I will see if I can go to that page to read that. Papa Kojo's vegetables are something is happening. This is further on down the line. This is where the children realize that there's something wrong. If you don't mind, I'll just try and find that page. Okay. The following afternoon, Atu found a frog lying on the muddy bank of the pond. Its pale underbelly was exposed, its limbs outstretched. It was dead. Close by in shallow water, another frog floated, just as dead. The next Tuesday, he'd noticed a lizard twitching on the rock nearby. It didn't move even when Jifa nudged it with a stick. Not far from it was a bird on its back, with its legs stiff in death. By Wednesday, 4 fish floated upside down in the pond, gills splayed open. On Thursday, Atu and his friends gathered at Chiro to weed their project, water it, and build their scarecrow. Though crows continued to swoop too close to their tender sprouts, Atu noticed something else. Some smaller birds in the shrubs seemed too sick to fly off, even when he drew close to them. Choco, their dog, lay quietly beside them, and she hadn't yet touched the bone Jifa had brought her. Leslie took a picture of a tiny brown sparrow with his phone. It was huddled on the ground, shuddering and blinking slowly. It's some animal disease, he said. It's more than an animal disease, Jifa said, looking around. The reeds growing in and around the pond had all lost their firmness, leaning limply to one side. Most had turned a sickly straw color. A number that had been curling up the week before were completely shriveled. The leaves of the water lilies had all turned yellow and brown. Something was wrong at Chiro. Across the pond, Papa Kojo's was not a good story. Together with his sons, he tramped up and down between the rows of vegetables. They stooped to inspect the leaves, and they pulled some of them up to scrutinize the roots for worms. For the first time, as I could remember, Papa Kojo did not smile back when he waved to him. It looked as if Papa Kojo might not have enough produce left for them to compare their vegetables with. So this is a threat. Suddenly, this is a beautiful spot. Everything grows nice and green and lush, and suddenly something is wrong. And this is where the children have to find out what is wrong, and it requires a lot of courage because they find that they're coming up against one of the most powerful people in the community. And I feel that is something that young people will face, especially in this fight against climate change, because a lot of the big players in this industry are extremely powerful, and it can be quite intimidating coming up against rows of men and women, I suppose, institutes who will do anything to block off the advances that are being made by people in this space, trying to create a fair environment for the plants, the animals, the skies, for all of us living on this earth.
Now, if we can shift just a little bit, because I think the Zongo community is important to talk about in the Forbidden Stream. We're looking at disparities, it seems, between Ato's community and the Zongo community.
Yes, I would love to talk about it. So actually, that's where the title comes from, Crossing the Stream. And just to give it a little bit of a backstory, when I was young, there was a forbidden stream, a stream that we were not allowed to cross. It was a heavily polluted stream. And of course, because it was forbidden, it was extremely attractive to us. And we would go, as soon as the adults in the house had gone off somewhere, a funeral or something, we'd go running off to the stream and go. And there were lots of things that shouldn't be in water in that stream, but we would go and play in it. And that stream divided the community that I lived in as a child from another community called Nima. And Nima was largely a Zongo community. And in the Zongo community, you do have some affluent people living in there, but it's largely a less privileged community as compared to the rest of the city. And Ato comes to see what a Zongo is like. Now, Ato's grandmother has her backstory. Ato's father grew up in an affluent part of town, and just across from him was the Zongo. Now, Ato's grandmother did not want, she had strong misgivings about her son going over to play in the Zongo. But he would go there and he formed connections with children over there, connections that remained till the end of his life. He died suddenly, quite abruptly. And the friendships that he formed there were pivotal in who he became later on. And they were friendships that his mother, that's Ato's grandmother, came to value much later on. So Ato's grandmother herself has some regrets. She remembers the kind of son that she had, somebody who was willing to step across boundaries and borders that had been drawn up by people before him. And sometimes we inherit those boundaries. Oh, don't talk to these people. Oh, we don't go here. Oh, we have nothing to do with people like that. And you often find that the generations afterwards begin to question that. Why? Because those cross-border conversations are important, those connections that we need to build in order to understand what's going on the other side for both people. So Ato's grandmother remembers how her son, as a child, kept wanting to cross over that forbidden stream into the Zongo, play with children there, and how upset and angry she got with him. She grew to value the relationship that he made there, and he formed some friends there who became friends with the grandmother later on. And so now, with her grandson, she is now taking him across the stream into that community to see what goes on there, to see the friendships and the connections that his father had made. And this is something that builds a lot of strength into Ato, because he, in coming up against a powerful person in his community, is reminded how his father crossed that stream, went over into the Zongo community, forged friendships, and broke barriers, pre-existing barriers. And this gave him the courage to then decide that he was going to cross that border that he had. And in this case, it was that you can't go here relationship between him and that powerful person in his community. It more or less empowered him to step over that imaginary boundary and break down the wall that was there and the problem that had arisen. So it's metaphorical as well. There was physically a stream that was crossed, and in addition to that, the crossing of that stream then enables our young character to step over another border or boundary or wall, to then take to take hold, or to rather to move into new territory and conquer a problem that would otherwise have been probably too much for him to handle.
Well, I want to open it up for questions if people have questions in the chat. But before I do, I wanted to note that there is an audio version of Crossing the Stream, which people can get access through if they have the subscription to Audible. But also there's something called Hoopla. If it's a free access that you can get to listen to your book here in the United States. People just go through their library. So it's Hoopla for free. And if you want to pay for it, you can go through Audible. I think that it is so the audio version is so good to hear Ghanaian, speaking, because our teachers then they don't have to worry or wonder about how to pronounce something. It's being pronounced, for them the Ghanaian way. And did you know that this was going to happen? And did you, that they were going to share your book from print to? How does that whole process work? With an author and the different formats?
Well, Brenda, I have to confess to you that my job was to write a great story with the help of my editor and my agents, and the publisher took care of everything else.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's what I focus on. I focus on writing the story and getting it to be the best that it can be. And I would like to say a very big thank you to my wonderful agent and to my editor as well, and of course to the team at Norton that helped me put out this wonderful book.
Well, I think we have 3 minutes left. Is there? I'm not sure if the Q&A is working. Wait a second here to see if a question comes up. But that's so interesting to know about the audio version. What I have noticed in the past few years is that books that are written by African authors are appearing in Audible and in these other formats, which is wonderful. It's just wonderful to have them. Absolutely.
It is. Sometimes when we're writing, we worry about pronunciation, whether people from other cultures and countries can pronounce the words, but we feel, well, there's Google there. You can find out how it's pronounced.
Let's see. I have a deeper question from someone here, which is, why did you choose to combine a tale about family rifts against the backdrop of environmental themes? Were you consciously trying to get young people to think about how the human species wantonly destroys its own habitat?
I don't think I was consciously thinking about it, but it's something that has been very much a part of my consciousness, extremely so. And I think it is the case for most people. Just walking around your town, your community, you can't help but see what's going on around you. So it seemed almost natural that this story that I was writing, it's about love and healing rifts, and it's about the power of intergenerational connections. And playing it out on this stage seemed just about the most natural thing to do, because I'm looking at what was then and what is now. You'll often speak to older people talking about how things used to be back in the day, and younger children can only listen and imagine what things were like. And so having that connection so that a child could have a picture of then and a picture of now, and as a result of that, get some momentum to propel himself forward, was a natural development of the story.
Well, I think our time is up. I want to thank you so much for being with us from Accra. We have certainly enjoyed listening to you, and I have enjoyed reading the book and listening to the book. And I created a short bibliography for people who might be interested in other books that deal with this topic and a theme. So I think you will find that in the resources. So again, thank you, Elizabeth-Irene Baitie, for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Brenda, for having me.
Muted.
Thank you for reminding me to unmute. You make me want to go back and read the book again. By the way, thanks to the recommendation from our resident librarian, Brenda Randolph, I did listen to the audiobook. It was a wonderful experience, and go run, get the book, and we can't wait to get the sequel.
Thank you, Maura.